Bit of a different video today, but I swear this is relevant to public speaking and communication, so just stay with me, okay? I am Canadian, and Canada's been going through some stuff lately. Bit of neighborhood drama, you might say, guy next door not fully respecting the property line, if you catch my drift. And Canadians have been responding to that drama in all sorts of ways. Today I want to talk about one of those ways and what we can learn about it. Because communication is at its core a way that we make sense of our human experiences and share them with others. We make hugely consequential decisions, both individually and collectively, based on the information that's communicated to us, the way we interpret that information, and the emotional responses that we have to it. A skilled communicator is someone who is aware of how they're influenced by the messages they receive from other people, as well as how they influence or can influence others through the way that they communicate. And a good human is someone who seeks to wield that power responsibly with respect for the autonomy and the well-being of others. So even though I don't usually get overtly political on this platform, today we're going to talk about living in interesting times, a 25-year-old beer commercial, and how the words of one person can have an influence on an entire nation. So let's set the scene. As of filming, it is early June 2025, and Canada is experiencing a period of relative calm compared to the last few months. Since January, the guy in charge of our neighbor to the south has rocked our economy with a trade war, made comments threatening our sovereignty, and had a huge impact on the outcome of our federal election. In the midst of all this, a lot of Canadians have been experiencing a sense of worry and instability that is unfamiliar to them. And it's causing them to do a lot of thinking about what it means to be Canadian. And people here are not taking kindly to being pushed around. Canadians have a reputation around the world for being nice, and that is largely true. When you live in a harsh climate that can be hard to survive, when you're a relatively small population that depends on foreign allies, both for security and for economic development, it's pretty natural that you'll develop a culture based around being diplomatic and cooperative. But here's the thing that not a lot of people outside of our borders realize. You don't grow up side by side with Canada geese and not learn a thing or two about spite. See, Canada geese are fairly unassuming animals. They make funny noises, their babies are cute and fluffy. When they're not flying around in V formations with their fam, they're on the ground getting chonky, eating all the grass in sight. But if you get into a goose's face, if it feels threatened by you, that bird will f you up. So Canadian spite has been on full display. Massive boycotts of American products and support for Canadian products. Booing the US national anthem at hockey games, canceling travel to the States, and going on vacation either in Canada or in Mexico or Europe. People have floated the idea of introducing a civil defense corps. I spoke to one gentle suburban grandma who's thinking about getting a firearms license. Things have shifted here. And that brings me to a beer commercial that went the pre-social media version of viral 25 years ago.
Hey, I'm not a lumberjack or a fur trader, and I don't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled.
I'm not going to play much of the video because I don't want YouTube to dig me for copyright, but this was an ad for Molson Canadian that first aired in March 2000, and it was a huge hit. I wasn't even old enough to drink at the time, but like everyone else, I had it memorized. I can proudly sew my country's flag on a backpack. I believe in peacekeeping, not policing, diversity, not assimilation, and that the beaver is a truly proud and noble animal. A toque is a hat. A Chesterfield is a couch, and it's pronounced Zed, not Z, Zed. Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joe, and I am Canadian. Whenever and wherever this ad came on, rooms full of people would lose their minds. There's a deep sense of pride in this country over the weird little guys that we are. And to be clear, that is not unique to Canadians. The desire to identify with and be part of an in-group is a very human instinct. We gravitate towards ideas of what makes us like the people around us and not like everybody else. And Molson made very savvy use of this desire to sell a product named after this identity that's held so dear by so many of us. And of course, this whole speech is simplistic. It flattens a national identity into a handful of platitudes and lovable quirks. It avoids anything that might have been seen as controversial in March 2000 because it was a beer ad. They were just trying to whip up some patriotic enthusiasm so they could push more product. But then something interesting happened because Joe the Canadian is actually an actor named Jeff Douglas. And this year, in response to the events shaking up our continent and the anger and frustration felt by many of us, Jeff Douglas reprised that character for a new rant, this one called We Are Canadian.
Hey, I know it's in our nature to cut a guy some slack, give him the benefit of the doubt.
And this time it wasn't as a beer salesman at the tail end of the 90s, but as a Canadian guy with a point of view at a point in history when we've seen massive societal change, both for better and for worse. And in that context, I want to talk about the creative choices and rhetorical techniques that he used in this new video, the reasoning I think was behind them, and what we can all learn from them about effective communication. First, let's talk about the purpose of this video and its target audience, because that is always where we start when we're talking about communication strategy. What are we trying to accomplish? And who needs to resonate with their message in order to achieve that? Obviously, I can't read Jeff Douglas's mind, but I'm going to make an educated guess that his goal was to activate a sense of patriotism in the Canadian public, to motivate the solidarity and collective action that might be needed in order to defend our country and our economy. Think of it like the speech that a general might give to an army before they go into battle, or the pep talk that a football coach gives the team in the locker room when they're down in the second half. But the target audience is not all Canadians. We are way too diverse for any one message to resonate with all of us. And any attempt to cater to an audience that diverse is going to get so watered down that it just doesn't appeal to anyone. No, Jeff's target audience is a lot more specific. It is Canadians who feel a sense of connection with their identity as Canadians and who are old enough to remember the original I Am Canadian video in 2000. So let's talk about how he appeals to the emotions of that audience. In the We Are Canadian rant, Jeff mentions double doubles, Putin, Harry Fox, Gord Downie, ketchup chips, hockey brawls, beavers, getting her done, peacekeeping, the Schwinnigan handshake, and the line stand on guard for thee from our national anthem, incidentally the same national anthem that is playing in the background of the video. All of these things are well known and instantly recognizable to most people who either grew up in Canada or have been here for a long time, and meaningless or inscrutable to outsiders. And while universal healthcare, which is also mentioned, exists in countries all over the world, you might be shocked at how living next to the United States has made our healthcare system a core part of Canadian national identity. Taken together, these references set up an in-group and an out-group and position the target audience firmly within the in-group. And this is key to all of it. Humans have a strong innate tendency to identify with groups that share some social category compared to others outside of the group. We tend to have more empathy towards others we perceive as being in our in-group and a greater expectation that members of that in-group will help each other. And national identity is one hell of an in-group, especially when you're feeling under threat by a foreign power. We might live in different regions of this huge piece of land. We might speak different languages and have different lifestyles and vote differently. But we have a shared history and shared musical traditions and shared foods and shared pop culture references and shared folk heroes. And all of these things can be used to activate a shared social identity that will motivate us to work together when we need to. But it's not just about what Joe the Canadian says, it's about how he says it. And the structure of this rant echoes the structure of the first one, which is fun. Humans love callbacks, especially callbacks to things that we liked in earlier, simpler times. So here's how it goes. He builds the tension by starting in this very calm and measured way. The character comes off as shy, unassuming, even a little awkward. He approaches the mic with a bit of a slouch, and he speaks hesitantly. Again, we're tapping into this social identity of the Canadian as the polite one who doesn't want to ruffle any feathers, just wants everyone to get along. But then it starts to build. His voice gets louder and more assertive right around the time that he says, "They mistake our modesty for meekness." This is the part of the emotional journey where we decide that no, we are not going to take it anymore. He starts forcefully punctuating words, and he's almost shouting by the time he reaches the line, "We are not the 51st anything." That line, delivered in that cadence at this point in history, is a call to arms. It's the Canadian equivalent of "they might take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom." It's designed to make you pump your fist in the air and go out and do an act of patriotism. Get to know your neighbors, buy from a local business, spell color with the U, Canadian stuff. Finally, he ends by coming back to that initial stereotypical persona with a timid thank you and an awkward thumbs up. This gives a nice bit of symmetry to the video, and it also helps to release the emotions that have built up during the rant. Because the thing is that this isn't exactly like a speech before a battle or a football game. When you need to get your audience ready for a short, intense burst of activity, then you want to kind of whip them up into an emotional frenzy and leave them there. You end on that crescendo. But this is different. The person watching the We Are Canadian video isn't about to jump into some short, intense burst of activity. You're not going to listen to Joe from Canada going, "We are Canadian," and then immediately run to the border wielding a bayonet. But please don't do that. You might be watching it when you're, making dinner in the midst of a prolonged, stressful economic and geopolitical situation. In that context, putting you into fight or flight mode and then leaving you there is actively unhelpful. It can be exhausting. In order to be effective, the message needs to make you feel powerful, but also safe. So he gives you the excitement and catharsis of "we are not the 51st anything," and then he brings you gently back to baseline with a little bit of humor so that you feel empowered to take action, even if that action is just sharing the video with a friend. But you also get to pace yourself and sustain that energy over the long term. When you're presenting, the way you end your speech needs to suit the context in which the audience is consuming it and what you want them to do immediately afterwards. In this case, I think Jeff Douglas hit the right note. This rant is 1 minute and 42 seconds long. Given that the average person speaks between 130 and 150 words per minute, that would put it somewhere between 185 and 213 words. But using the principle that a picture speaks 1,000 words, it has a lot more to say than that. First of all, Jeff/Joe never specifically names the person he's talking about. You can probably figure it out from context clues, but just in case, he shows us a picture. Sorry for the jump scare. And specifically, it's a picture of that person looking down his nose and smirking. It's designed to make us angry. Then we see a collage of that person's supporters, and it's in black and white. What does this make you think of? Maybe something that happened in the 40s that may or may not be echoed in things we're seeing today. Are you scared? Because I'm a little scared. We've also got messages that reinforce that sense of Canadian identity. Hockey players celebrating a goal. A scene from the Gander Airport where Newfoundlanders welcomed thousands of air travelers who had been diverted on 9/11. The RCAF snowbirds. So many maple leaves, so much red. The flag, the flag, the flag. It's all there to reinforce your status within the in-group. You recognize these images. They make you feel things. You are part of something. You want to protect that thing. But there's one photo that does a lot of heavy lifting, and I want to dig into what Jeff Douglas has done with it, because patriotism is complicated. And in Canada in 2025, going, "Rah, rah, our country is perfect and amazing," is a pretty hard sell. In the 25 years since I Am Canadian hit the airwaves, Canadians have done a lot of grappling with the racism that is woven into the fabric of our country and the deep divisions that exist between us. So here's where communication gets tricky, because a lot of important messages come with important caveats. And so you almost have to choose between doubling down on the vibes you're trying to activate while ignoring those caveats, or getting so bogged down in the caveats that the emotional resonance of your message gets lost. So here's what Jeff Douglas did, and I'd love to hear in the comments whether you think he struck the right balance. He says 4 words. Are we perfect? No. That's an understatement. But he pairs it with an image that, for this particular audience, perfectly encapsulates how very not perfect we really are. This photo was taken during the Oka crisis, also known as Ganatadage resistance, which was a months-long standoff between a group of Mohawk people and the town of Oka, Quebec. The Mohawk mounted resistance against plans to build a golf course and condominiums on land which included a Mohawk burial ground. This dispute came after centuries of European settlers and their descendants claiming and selling off Mohawk land. For 30 years, the Mohawk pursued legal remedies against the construction and eventual expansion of the golf course and were repeatedly denied. Then in 1990, it eventually culminated in a protest and multiple barricades by Mohawk land defenders. The situation escalated, the Canadian military got involved, other Indigenous groups went to support the Mohawk. 2 people lost their lives and dozens more were hospitalized, including a 14-year-old with nearly fatal injuries. And for those of us who grew up in Canada and remember the first I Am Canadian rant, this photo of a Canadian soldier and an Ojibwe activist staring each other down is one of the most recognizable and powerful visual symbols we have of the hurt and the anger and the injustice that simmer beneath our country's polite facade. All of this in the seconds that it took to utter the words, "Are we perfect?" No. I've heard from people who strongly prefer one of these videos over the other, either the first one because it's more celebratory and fun, or the second one because it's more nuanced and speaks to the heavy feelings they've been having lately. For all their surface level similarities, they are very different videos because they serve very different purposes. But one thing that jumps out at me is how both of them demonstrate an understanding of how to direct a target audience towards a certain set of behaviors. And Canadian or not, we can all learn from that. So what do you think? Did this video do it for you? What do you think of the rhetorical techniques and creative choices that Jeff Douglas used in this video? And how might you take inspiration from them to use in your own work? Let me know in the comments. As for me, I'll say this. My homeland is a beautiful place. All dressed is the superior potato chip. And the Canada goose is a proud and terrifying animal. My name is Alex, and I take the ick out of public speaking. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Contact me through the link in description if you want to punch up your own public speaking. And thank you.